They miss you more than they'll ever admit. But that doesn't mean they'll come back. You might think their silence means indifference, that the absence is proof they've moved on. But that's not what's happening. Not for them. Not in the mind of someone avoidant. Because when an avoidant misses you, it's not a longing they know how to move toward. It's a longing that scares them. They don't reach out because missing you hurts. And to feel hurt is to feel exposed. And exposure is what they've been running from their whole life. They'll think of you at night, when the world is quiet, when there's no distraction, no chaos to hide behind. You'll flicker in their mind. A sound, a scent, a moment, the warmth of what used to be safe. And for a brief second, their chest tightens. That's missing you. But right behind that feeling comes fear. Fear that if they return, they'll lose themselves again. Fear that closeness will undo all the fragile order they've built. Because that's what love did before. It blurred their edges. It pulled them into someone else's orbit until they didn't know who they were anymore. They promised themselves they'd never let that happen again. So even as they miss you, they remind themselves, distance keeps me safe. It's not because they don't feel. It's because they feel too much. When they think of you, it doesn't stay a soft memory. It turns into tension, a storm of what-ifs. What if I can't handle it again? What if they see me and I break? What if I ruin it all the same way I did before? Missing you becomes dangerous because it opens the door to everything they've tried to suppress. So they build walls around the memory, like it's a wildfire. They tell themselves stories. It wouldn't have worked. They're better off without me. I've changed too much. They try to think their way out of what they feel, but emotions don't disappear just because you reason with them. So they keep showing up through dreams, through songs, through sudden pangs of nostalgia that make no sense to their rational mind. They'll see something that reminds them of you, and for a second, their heart will jump before their logic steps in. They'll freeze. They'll distract. They'll scroll. They'll shut it down. Because to let that ache stay for too long is to risk remembering how good it once felt to be close. And closeness, to them, still feels like surrender. They'll say they're fine. They'll stay busy. They'll seem distant, detached, maybe even cold. But that's not peace. That's management. It's the nervous system doing what it's always done. Protect. When an avoidant misses you, they don't run toward comfort. They run toward control. Because control feels like safety. And safety has always mattered more than connection. And yet, there's still a flicker, a quiet pull that never fully dies. They'll replay moments in their mind. Not the fights, not the distance, but the small, quiet things. The way you listened, the way you didn't push, but stayed present, the way your eyes softened when they finally let their guard down. Those memories are the hardest ones because they don't fit into their story of why it couldn't work. They're too real, too human, too warm. They start to feel something unfamiliar. Regret, not just for losing you, but for realizing how much of themselves they never allowed you to see. They remember moments when they could have been honest, but chose silence, when they could have reached for you, but turned away instead. And now, in the quiet, those missed moments haunt them. They start to see that their distance didn't protect them, it punished them, that their silence didn't bring peace. It built loneliness. But even with that awareness, they still won't come back. Because awareness isn't healing. It's just the doorway to it. And to walk through that doorway requires vulnerability, something their nervous system still equates with danger. They'll hover near the threshold, feeling both the ache to return and the fear of being known again. They might type a message and delete it, look at your profile, and scroll past. Open the chat and close it again. They're fighting a war inside themselves. One side yearning for closeness, the other clinging to safety. And safety still wins. They don't come back because missing you isn't enough to override what they fear. Missing you feels safer from afar. It lets them feel love without the risk of being loved back. It lets them remember without re-entering, feel without surrendering, long without losing control. It's how they stay in the illusion of connection without ever facing the real thing. They don't just miss you, they miss the version of themselves that existed around you. Because with you, they were softer, warmer, a little more alive. They didn't know it then, but you brought out the parts of them that had been asleep for years. And now, in the quiet, those parts start whispering again. The ones that wanted to reach out, the ones that wanted to stay, the ones that hoped they could finally love without losing themselves. They'll remember your voice, not the words, but the tone, the calmness, the way you didn't rush them. They'll replay those moments in their head, like fragments of a dream they can't get back to. But they won't talk about it. They won't tell anyone. That missing you has become a private ritual, because to admit that would be to admit they still care. And caring means exposure. Avoidance grieve in silence. Their heartbreak doesn't look like tears or breakdowns. It looks like distance, distraction, control. They turn pain into logic, love into lessons, and loss into productivity. You'll see them posting, smiling, thriving. But that doesn't mean they've healed. It means they're managing the ache. Every routine they build, every plan they make, it's all an attempt to outrun the feeling that something's missing. And that something is you. They'll convince themselves they've made peace, that the distance was right, that they've outgrown the connection. But the body doesn't forget. The nervous system remembers. It remembers the warmth in your presence, the calm in your energy, the safety in your tone. Even when the mind denies it, the body still reacts. It's why they get a lump in their throat when they hear your name, why their chest tightens when they see something that reminds them of you, why they still check your profile, but pretend they don't care. That's not indifference. That's repression. Missing you for them isn't a linear emotion. It's a cycle. Longing, fear, avoidance, relief, then longing again. It loops because the same system that wants connection also fears it. They can't shut one off without numbing the other. So they live in this half-alive state where they miss you enough to ache, but not enough to act, where they feel love only in the safety of imagination, where the fantasy of you feels safer than the reality. When an avoidant misses you, they don't daydream about reunion. They daydream about moments where they didn't feel afraid. They might imagine sitting beside you again, but not in conflict, not in intensity, just peace. The quiet mornings, the late night laughter, the simple safety. They long for the emotional climate you created, not just the relationship itself, because that climate was the closest they've ever come to feeling both safe and connected at the same time. But that balance terrifies them now, because safety and love, to them, still don't belong in the same sentence. In their nervous system, love equals danger, love equals loss, love equals exposure. And so, the moment they start missing you, the brain steps in to protect them. It says, don't go there, don't feel that, don't remember too much. They turn their ache into armor. Sometimes, they'll even project it onto you. They'll tell themselves, you wouldn't understand. You moved on too easily. You never really cared. Because it's easier to see you as detached than to admit that they're the ones still holding on. That's how they protect the illusion of control, by rewriting the story. But the heart knows. It always knows. It beats faster when they see something that looks like you. It softens when they remember your kindness. It stings when they think of what could have been. This is the cruel paradox of the avoidant. They miss you deeply, but have no language for it. They feel the loss, but can't express it. They crave closeness, but confuse it with danger. They want to come back, but to return would mean facing everything they've avoided. Their fear of love, their fear of loss, their fear of being known. And those fears still run the show. They might try to find pieces of you elsewhere, in new people, in distractions, in routines that fill the space you once occupied. But nothing fits the same, because what they miss isn't just you, it's the version of them that only existed in your presence. That's what keeps them stuck, missing someone they're too afraid to face, and a version of themselves they're too afraid to become again. They think about reaching out. They type your name. Their thumb hovers over the message bar, but something stops them. A tightening in their chest, a whisper in their head that says, "Don't ruin your progress. Don't look weak. Don't risk it." That whisper isn't logic. It's fear wearing logic's mask. It's the same voice that's always guided them, the one that mistakes connection for danger and distance for safety. They don't delete your number. They just pretend they don't need it. They don't stop checking on you. They just make sure to do it when no one's watching. Every "I'm fine" post, every smile they give the world, it's a layer of armor, a way to silence the truth that they still feel you. Not constantly, not every day, but enough to unsettle the calm they're trying to build. Because the truth is, the avoidant never really stops feeling. They just suppress faster than they process. They shove the emotion down before it can form words. They silence the ache before it can rise to the surface. They bury the love before it can demand expression. But what's buried alive still moves beneath the surface. And that's what eats at them. That restlessness, that sense of something missing, that faint emotional hum, that keeps vibrating in the background. No matter how much they distract themselves, they tell themselves, "I could reach out, but it wouldn't change anything." They call it acceptance, but it's not acceptance. It's resignation. It's fear disguised as maturity. Because real acceptance doesn't ache this much. Real peace doesn't need this much convincing. Sometimes they'll dream about you, and in the dream, you're not fighting. You're not leaving. You're just there. They'll wake up startled, not by the memory, but by the warmth they felt in it. That warmth feels foreign now. They've gotten so used to the cold. It's strange how loneliness can start to feel like home. When love has always meant pain, they want to come back, but not as themselves. They want to return as someone healed, someone whole, someone who won't disappoint you again. That's why they stay away. Not because they don't care, but because they don't believe they can be what you deserve. They think distance is kindness. They think silence is mercy. But really, it's avoidance in disguise. They replay your last moments together. They remember the look in your eyes when you realized you couldn't fix it anymore. They remember the silence that followed, the heavy kind, the kind that says, "We both know this isn't what we wanted." They remember wanting to say something, but not knowing what. Wanting to stay, but not knowing how. That confusion becomes the scar, because missing you isn't just about loss. It's about unfinished emotion. Everything they didn't say, still echoing in the spaces they left behind. They try to rewrite the story in their mind. They tell themselves, "You were better off without me. It wouldn't have worked anyway. I had to protect my peace." But beneath those words is the voice that still whispers, "What if I was wrong?" Because they know you weren't the threat. Their feelings were. You were the mirror, the one who reflected their vulnerability back to them, the one who made them feel things they'd locked away for years. And when you got too close to what they'd buried, they mistook you for danger. Now, they live in contradiction, wanting the warmth you gave, but needing the distance that keeps them safe. That's the avoidance constant state. A heart that wants to open, and a body that won't let it. They think missing you will fade if they just wait long enough. But it doesn't fade. It mutates. It becomes nostalgia, then guilt, then apathy. Then, one quiet night, it becomes grief again. Because love doesn't leave just because they do. It lingers. It waits. It watches them pretend they're fine. They start to wonder if you still think about them. They won't ask. They won't text. But that question hums beneath everything they do. It hides behind their confidence, behind their smiles, behind their "I've moved on." They start looking for you in the people they meet, the tone of someone's voice, the shape of someone's laugh, the softness in someone's eyes. But it never matches because it was never just what you did. It was how you saw them. You saw past the walls, past the silence, past the detachment, and they've never felt that kind of seeing since. Now, missing you feels like remembering sunlight, something that once warmed them, but now burns when they think about it too long. They miss you, but they also miss who they were with you. And that's the cruelest part, because to come back would mean risking becoming that person again, the one who felt, the one who hoped, the one who tried. And for them, that's still too dangerous. They won't reach out, but they'll think about it. Every single day, they'll scroll by your name. They'll hover on your story. They'll wonder if you still think about them. Then they'll put the phone down, because missing you in silence feels safer than the risk of being met with indifference. They've learned to confuse safety with not feeling anything at all, so they'll cope the only way they know how. From a distance, they'll watch, they'll listen, they'll collect fragments of you, like evidence that they still exist somewhere in your world. They might ask a mutual friend how you're doing, but act like it's casual. They might stumble across your posts and tell themselves it was by accident. They'll check the dates, the captions, the tone. Every little detail becomes a way to read you without having to face you. Because if they can understand your emotions from afar, they don't have to risk feeling rejected up close. They convince themselves they're just curious. But that curiosity is grief in disguise. It's the nervous system looking for evidence that the connection wasn't all in their head. Because avoidants don't miss through expression. They miss through observation. They miss through silence, through control. That's their comfort zone. That's how they feel, without admitting that they are. They'll talk about you, but not in the way that reveals longing. They'll say things like, "Yeah, we don't talk anymore," or "It just wasn't meant to be." But listen closely. Their voice tightens a little. Their breath shifts. Their eyes linger somewhere else. That's the moment they feel the ache. It passes quickly, but it's real. And when they're alone, that's when the walls start cracking. The show fades. The logic quiets. And the loneliness starts whispering again. It doesn't scream. It just hums in the background, like a faint static they can't turn off. They'll feel it most in the quiet moments, when the day ends, when the noise stops, when their routine can't fill the gap anymore. That's when your memory sneaks in, not as a thought, but as a feeling, a warmth in the chest, a heaviness behind the ribs. They'll sigh and call it exhaustion, but you know what it is. It's missing you. Sometimes they'll dream of you again, not vividly, just flashes. Your smile, your laugh, the way you once looked at them like they were safe to love. They'll wake up unsettled because their body remembers what their mind denies. They'll shake it off, make coffee, scroll through their phone, but that feeling stays, a gentle haunting. They can't explain to anyone. When the avoidant misses you, they don't chase closure. They chase control. They'd rather keep the door half open than risk knocking and finding it locked. That's why they linger, why they still check, why they stay in orbit. It's not indecision, it's protection. Because if they come too close, they risk feeling powerless again. And for someone who learned that vulnerability equals danger, powerlessness feels like death. So they cope by staying almost close, close enough to see you, far enough to stay safe. That's why they'll like an old photo, why they'll respond to a story with an emoji, then disappear again. That's their version of I miss you, a breadcrumb instead of a bridge, a signal that says, I'm still here, but I can't handle being seen. They might replay your old messages, scroll through pictures, revisit the same songs you once shared. But the moment the emotions rise, they'll shut the app, lock the phone, and go still. Because to feel is to risk collapse, and collapse feels like exposure. You might think they've forgotten, but they haven't. They've just rewritten the memory, so it hurts less to hold. They tell themselves, it was good while it lasted. It taught me what I needed to know. I'm better now. But beneath those stories is the same old wound, the belief that closeness always costs too much. That's why they won't come back. Not because they don't miss you, but because they can't survive what being with you would awaken. And still, they keep you alive in their quiet ways, in the playlist they can't delete, in the route they still take, even though it passes by your street, in the scent they avoid in stores, because it reminds them too much of you. Their life becomes a museum of subtle avoidance. Everything labeled, everything controlled, everything untouched, except for the ache that never goes away. They won't say it out loud, but they still carry you like a secret, not as a regret, not as a wish, but as a truth that still breathes somewhere deep, the one they never had the courage to face. Because love was never the problem, feeling it was. And that's the heartbreak of the avoidant. They finally miss you. The moment they're too afraid to do anything about it, there comes a point where even the avoidant can't escape the echo anymore. They'll be sitting in silence one day, and something small will break the pattern. A song, a memory, a smell that belongs to no one else but you. And suddenly, it all comes rushing back. Not the drama, not the tension, just the warmth, the calm, the way their body once felt safe near yours. They won't say it out loud, but they'll feel it deep. That tug between what they want and what they fear. For a moment, they'll wonder if it's too late, if there's still a way back, if they could reach out without crumbling. But they'll hesitate, because coming back means more than saying, I miss you. It means facing themselves. And that's the one thing they've always run from. You see, for the avoidant, missing you isn't about absence. It's about awareness. Awareness that they felt something real. And that real means risk. They'll try to reason it away. Tell themselves it was timing. Tell themselves it wasn't meant to be. But deep down, they know it was fear. Fear of needing. Fear of losing control. Fear of letting someone love them where they still feel unworthy. That's the secret they never say. That you were never too much. They were just too scared to receive something that pure. And if you've been on the other side of that story, you've probably felt the ache too. The confusion of being missed in silence, of feeling their energy, but never hearing their voice. You've felt that strange connection. That lingers even after the ending. That invisible thread that says, this isn't over, just unfinished. But you're not crazy for feeling it. Because emotional bonds don't break clean. They fade, they echo, they return in whispers. And sometimes healing means letting those echoes soften, without needing them to stop. The truth is, they do miss you, but missing you isn't enough. Not until they're ready to meet the version of themselves that love once scared them to death to be. Because the kind of connection you offered requires presence, requires courage, requires a heart that's done running. And until that moment comes, they'll stay where it's safe, in the space between wanting and leaving. Close enough to remember, far enough to avoid feeling too much. But here's what they'll never understand. You were never waiting for them. You were waiting for peace, for clarity, for the freedom to love without begging to be chosen. You weren't waiting for a text, or a comeback, or a closure. You were waiting to come back to yourself. And you did. Because healing doesn't mean they return. It means you finally stop reaching into the distance. For someone who only feels safe in it, maybe they'll grow one day. Maybe they'll face what they've buried. Maybe they'll learn that love doesn't mean losing control. But that's not your work anymore. That's theirs. Your work is to keep your heart soft, not for them, but for yourself. Because even after being loved in fragments, you still believe in wholeness. Even after being held and released, you still believe in connection. And that's what makes you different. You didn't run from love. You stayed open to it. So if they ever come back, you won't be waiting. You'll be ready. Ready to listen, but not to settle. Ready to understand, but not to shrink. Ready to love, without losing yourself this time. Because the real healing isn't about whether they return. It's about knowing that you no longer need them to. And if any part of this felt like your story, if you've loved someone who keeps their heart behind distance, remember this. You were never too much. You were the mirror that showed them what love could feel like. If they ever stopped running, they'll think of you often, not as the one who broke them, but as the one who showed them what safe could look like. And one day, when they're finally ready to face that truth, they'll understand. You weren't their danger. You were their chance. If this spoke to something in you, stay with that feeling. Because that ache isn't weakness. It's proof that you still have the capacity to love deeply, even when love has hurt. And that's your power.